The air crackled with outrage as the HOA president brazenly cut the pool line, demanding special treatment like she owned the place. Voices rose, tempers flared, and then the lifeguards locked the gates, trapping everyone inside. What unfolded next shattered the neighborhood's fragile calm, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The crowd's murmurs swelled into quiet but palpable tension. Parents glanced uneasily at one another, some clutching towels tighter, others shielding their children's eyes from the brewing storm. Emily felt Mia's small hand tighten around hers, her daughter's wide eyes silently asking why a grown-up could be so unfair. Around her, people shifted uncomfortably, caught between the desire to maintain peace and the urge to stand up against Linda's brazen move. Linda, however, seemed utterly unfazed by the rising discontent. Her posture remained rigid, shoulders squared, lips pressed into a thin line that barely concealed her irritation. The sunlight glinted off her polished nails as she tapped her foot impatiently. To her, the pool was an extension of her authority, a stage upon which she wielded power effortlessly. She hadn't just cut the line, she'd reasserted the hierarchy she believed ran the neighborhood, a hierarchy where her word outweighed common courtesy. Emily's mind raced. She knew the HOA president's role was to enforce community guidelines, but that power was meant to serve, not to intimidate or exclude. Linda's sense of entitlement was a poison, infecting the very spirit of what Willow Creek was supposed to be, a place of fairness and neighborly trust. What made it worse was the unspoken truth most residents quietly accepted. Linda used her position as a shield against accountability. Complaints had often vanished into thin air, dismissed by bureaucratic red tape or her own carefully crafted charm. The lifeguards, young and cautious, stood between their duty and the swelling crowd's frustration. Their eyes flicked to the pool's closed gates, their lips pressed tight in uncertainty. They were trained to keep order and ensure safety, not to police social squabbles. Yet the moment crackled with an electric charge of injustice they couldn't ignore. One of them, a tall guy named Jake, whispered to his colleague, "Should we do something? This isn't right." The other shrugged, eyes scanning the scene nervously. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as she weighed her options. She knew confrontation could escalate quickly, especially with someone like Linda, who thrived on control and confrontation. But silence felt like surrender. Around her, others began to step forward, emboldened by her quiet defiance. A mother with a toddler shifted her stance, a teenage boy crossed his arms defiantly, and a retiree folded his arms, eyes narrowed. In that charged moment, the community's shared frustration was crystallizing into something larger than a mere argument over pool access. It was a test of respect, fairness, and the delicate balance between authority and community spirit. Emily realized this wasn't just about a line or a pool. It was about whether Willow Creek's residents would allow a single person's ego to fracture their fragile harmony. Linda's voice cut sharply through the murmurs again. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her tone icy, as if daring anyone to challenge her further. "This pool belongs to all of us, but some of us have more say in how it's used." Her gaze swept arrogantly across the crowd, daring them to defy her. The lifeguards exchanged a quick glance. Without a word, the gate to the pool was slammed shut, the bright blue water shimmering beyond, but suddenly inaccessible. The crowd's shock rippled through the gathering. A collective gasp hung in the air, a sudden surge of disbelief and disbelief that a simple rule had turned into a power struggle so blatant and raw. Emily's heart thudded with a mix of relief and dread. The lifeguards hadn't let Linda just push through. They'd taken a stand, but what would come next? The line between neighborly patience and rebellion had been crossed, and the air was thick with the promise of confrontation. It was clear the peace of Willow Creek had been shattered, and no one could tell yet who would claim victory in this unexpected battle for fairness. The pool area, once alive with the carefree laughter of children and the splashes of water, now stood eerily silent except for the low hum of whispered grievances and the rustle of restless bodies. The locked gates formed a physical and symbolic barrier, an ironclad declaration that the day's leisure was suspended indefinitely, hostage to a clash of wills that none had anticipated. The heat from the afternoon sun pressed down heavily, its oppressive weight mirroring the thick tension hanging in the air like a dense fog. Emily's chest tightened as she looked around. Faces she had greeted cheerfully just moments ago now wore masks of disbelief and simmering resentment. The casual camaraderie of the neighborhood pool had fractured, replaced by suspicion and simmering anger. Children, initially bewildered, now tugged at their parents' hands, their confusion deepening into frustration as the promise of water and play dissolved before their eyes. Mia's small hand in Emily's felt limp, her usual bright enthusiasm dulled by the sudden loss. Linda remained rooted at the front, the embodiment of defiance. Her designer sunglasses reflected the sun, but concealed the flicker of unease behind them, a rare crack in her usually impenetrable facade. Her lips, pressed into a tight, hard line, betrayed the slightest tremor of frustration. She had wielded her power with certainty until now, but the unified stand of the lifeguards and the collective disapproval of the neighbors exposed her vulnerability. The veneer of control she cultivated was beginning to chip away, revealing the raw edge beneath. The lifeguards, too, were caught in the uncomfortable spotlight. Their authority was clear. They enforced the rules and ensured safety, but today they had become the unlikely arbiters of a community dispute. Jake, the taller lifeguard with the cautious eyes, shifted his weight uneasily. His voice, firm but measured, had sounded the closure announcement, but beneath that professionalism lay an awareness of the larger implications. He understood this was no ordinary pool incident. It was a standoff that questioned the very nature of leadership and fairness within their community. Around the perimeter, neighbors began to exchange low murmurs that rippled into quiet discussions, fractured by disbelief and growing solidarity. "She can't just do this," a mother whispered, her voice laced with resolve. A retiree nodded, his gaze sharp beneath furrowed brows. What had once been private grumblings were now stepping into the light, energized by the visible refusal of one woman to yield and the collective response that sought to hold her accountable. Emily's mind churned, weaving through memories of countless neighborhood meetings, polite smiles concealing grievances, and the subtle but persistent undercurrent of Linda's dominance. Here, in this sun-baked moment, the truth was undeniable. Power unchecked breeds resentment, and respect demanded more than a title or position. It required humility, fairness, and an acknowledgement of shared humanity, qualities Linda seemed to dismiss with a flick of her hand. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the fenced enclosure, a quiet determination began to settle over the crowd. They were no longer just spectators. They were participants in a turning point. The locked gates were not just a barrier to water, but a call to action, a reminder that rules mattered and that authority existed to serve, not to subjugate. Emily squeezed Mia's hand gently, drawing strength from the little girl's trust. Whatever came next, the neighborhood would have to reckon with this fracture, and perhaps from this moment of standstill, something truer and stronger might emerge. The air crackled with possibility, and the unspoken understanding that fairness, once denied, demands to be reclaimed. The oppressive heat of the afternoon gave way to a simmering tension that stretched over 60 agonizing minutes, each second thick with uncertainty and the weight of collective will. The crowd remained gathered like a tightly wound coil, neither dispersing nor surrendering, their simmering frustration tempered by a steadfast resolve that was both palpable and contagious. Emily stood rooted beside Mia, her gaze unwavering as the silent battle of authority and fairness played out in slow motion beneath the relentless sun. Suddenly, Linda's phone rang, piercing the charged silence like a sharp fracture. The sound was an unassuming intrusion, but what followed turned the tide with swift finality. Through a terse conversation, overheard in fragments by nearby ears, The HOA board members, those distant arbiters of neighborhood order, delivered a chilling ultimatum. Linda's conduct, they declared, had crossed the boundaries of the community's code of conduct. The consequence was clear and immediate. Her refusal to comply would prompt an emergency vote for her removal from the very office she wielded like a scepter. In that instant, the imperious facade cracked. The woman who had long stood above her neighbors with a crown of entitlement found herself stripped bare, exposed and vulnerable under the unblinking gaze of communal justice. Her posture stiffened, lips tightening into a bitter line as the weight of isolation pressed down. For all her previous arrogance and disdain, the summons of accountability was an unyielding force, one that no title or swagger could deflect. Her retreat was abrupt and stormy, words spat in defiance. Mob mentality, abuse of power, as if framing her capitulation as martyrdom might salvage some remnant of dignity. Yet the crowd did not waver. She vanished from the gates, swallowed by the hot asphalt and the hum of parked cars, leaving behind a silence heavy with consequence and the first flicker of hope. The gates clicked open moments later, lifeguards stepping forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The barrier dissolved, and with it the cloud that had hovered over the community pool all afternoon. Children surged forward, their delighted shrieks and laughter, a triumphant chorus that rippled through the space like a cleansing flood. Emily bent down, wrapping a protective arm around Mia, feeling the warm pulse of relief and pride coursing through her veins. The tension that had gripped her chest slowly unwound, replaced by the steady beat of justice restored. The confrontation that had begun in anger and disbelief now felt transformed, a testament not only to standing up against entitlement, but to the power inherent in collective courage. The community's unity had forged a line that no individual, no matter how powerful, could cross without consequence. In this moment, fairness was no abstract ideal, but a living, breathing force, a shared contract that bound neighbors together in mutual respect and responsibility. In the days that followed, the repercussions of that afternoon rippled outward. Linda's removal from the HOA presidency was swift and unambiguous, a signal that the era of unchecked authority had ended. The new board emerged with a mandate of transparency and respect, promising to rebuild trust fractured by arrogance and exclusion. Emily's quiet stand became a catalyst, inspiring others to find their voices, to challenge injustice when it surfaced, and to reclaim the true spirit of their neighborhood. Willow Creek, once merely a collection of houses and lawns, began to transform, evolving into a community where justice was not a distant ideal or an occasional victory, but an everyday promise. This promise, born from the bravery of ordinary people like Emily, was the foundation upon which the neighborhood would build its future, a future where entitlement was held in check, fairness prevailed, and every voice, no matter how small, carried weight.